Right. Tell me why this is important. Yeah.
So, well, Nikki's the only one that hasn't been on some of our trips, so I guess we're going to be more speaking to you, Nikki, back there in the back. As you know, Nikki, this area is blowing up with population, and growing up in Adrian, yourself and myself, we know how special the lands are around there, and we know the controversy with protections and everything else, and you know, it's just at what point do we really start drawing a line in the sand to keep what we think is special? And on that, with what you're doing for Adrian 2040 is showing the potential to build Adrian as a recreational-based community beyond everything. And as you know, recreation can build business can build recreation. So that's kind of the focus of this flight after our meeting last week. Is I was like, I really want to focus on the recreational aspect, and then kind of the protections and the geology that has been in conversation that I know is contentious with a lot of folks in the community, but there's a lot of science behind it as well. So our first spot we're going to shoot for is actually the Owyhee Dam, which is a huge recreational opportunity, which is already used, but just what can be built upon that as well.
Right. Sounds good.
Yeah, and then Sammy will talk about geology, and we'll put some science into this. And
well, we're flying over the valley here. Last time we kind of flew right over the front, but since we have the front as a good view out here, and as we're going over the valley, kind of boring, but we can make it exciting. So that front over there is actually fault controlled. There's a pretty large normal fault that dips towards us in the Earth's surface, so we're on the downdrop side of that fault. They call it a fault block. And anyway, that clearly controls the topography here, the front of the range. And then that range, I think, it's at least quaternary active, different segments of the fault. I think they might also be a few of them that are recognized to be Holocene active. Holocene is the last 10,000 or 11,000 years. Then this basin in here has been here for a really long time by the segments of faults that bound it on the outside. And as most of you are, pretty well aware, we farm a lot on these sediments that are known as Lake Idaho sediments that are about 12 to 5 million years old, depending on where you're at in the basin. And a lot of the flatter areas in the basin down here are because of those lake deposits. They're controlled by those lake deposits. And anyway, that large lake extended all the way from about Brogan, Oregon, or about Vail, all the way out towards Boise. And then that catastrophically emptied as the drainage was captured by the Columbia River drainage, and then of course that formed Hell's Canyon. Anyway, one of the really neat things I think about the lake right here is as far as oil and gas, all of the oil and gas that's taken out of Idaho is all taken out of this basin right down here, the New Plymouth area. Of course, the last couple of years, last decade, has been used as a oil basin. And so most of those sediments that contain those oil and natural gas materials are all of the age of the lake. Now that's important because as Chevron had explored out here for oil and gas in the 1970s, they looked further into the Owyhee and some of the sedimentary rocks that are present out there, like say the Rome area or some of the other Miocene age sedimentary rocks, and then exclusively Deer Butte and Mitchell Butte, which are there almost right. We're probably going to fly over them as we go into the canyon. Those sedimentary rocks are a little bit older than the basin itself, and they aren't known to contain any hydrocarbons, at least to any certain extent. And even if they do, the type of rock that they're made out of, it's a little bit older, it's a little bit more well cemented, so it would need a lot more processing to be able to get out the liquids, the hydrocarbons. So here, we're fortunate enough in this basin in New Plymouth that the oil, basically we just tap into it and it comes out. It's pretty easy to get. A little bit of energy in for a lot of energy out. But then of course if you...
So just keep chatting up.
Okay. But the stuff that's out there in the hills, if there is any, we'd have to put a lot more energy in to get the same amount of energy out, right? So we'd have to do more intensive drilling, potentially a type of fracking that uses a lot more water. So the type of extraction, oiling natural gas of the rocks that we're looking at doesn't really make sense, where it makes a little bit more sense down here in the valley. So as we consider industrial practices like either mining or natural gas exploration, going further into the Owyhee, we can explore wherever we want to, but it really doesn't make sense geologically that there's going to be any major economic potential for these for some of the mineral resources, or particularly oil and natural gas in this case. It just doesn't really make economic or environmental sense to go after these poor, and by poor I mean low-grade oil deposits there.
Well said.
Nikki, you might be able to see your family farm here soon off to the right.
Yeah, that's what I was just following the river.
Yeah. I guess one thing we could talk about is, the economic driver of recreation, and then also the public land we have right out our back door, and just put in size and everything else is. There's 4.6 million acres of BLM land in Malheur County, which is 78% of the county's land. So there's a huge opportunity to use our public lands to help build up our community in Malheur County. Off to the left, we got the Sucker Creek drainage, which there's a lot of potential for a lot of different recreation and camping use there. It's also area there is up for consideration under the new resource management plan that just came out on the 31st, which it comes down to public comment on how they're going to manage 76 different units that they fall into the lands of wilderness characteristics in Malheur County, which equals about 1.2 million acres. And one of the LWC units is the Sucker Creek area. This whole landscape out here has many different layers of the lands of wilderness characteristics. It's up for review right now. We got wilderness study areas, which you got 10% of the nation's wilderness study areas in this region. And then you got areas of critical environmental concern, and I'll point out some of them as we fly, which is pretty much all these areas, and why they fall under areas of critical environmental concern. There's plants that are found nowhere else in the world besides here in the Owyhee.
Farm. Find your farm?
Yeah, I did.
Awesome.
Yep, we're just back this way to the north.
Nikki, this land right here is, I mean, there's huge potential of discussion of how it could be used to help the Adrian 2040 planning and how it could help the town of Adrian grow. I mean, there's so much potential right here. And I mean, this is all right out the back door. This is, I mean, the area I grew up running around in as a kid and teenager.
Yep. Yeah, just right out here, actually right to the right side of the plain is where the route for the Owyhee off-road goes.
Yeah. I mean, I know I talked to you the other day about, maybe some ATV potentials and different things as well that can help build. And I mean, we got a large chunk of land here that could still coexist with ranching, but also have that as well.
This is a lot different way to see the route, huh?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, there have been some people that are pushing to have an ultra marathon developed, running from the dam back this way. Have to find a route.
I mean, there's potential for even mountain bike racing and everything along that lines as well.
Caldera traffic, Cessna 35 Alpha, 7 miles.
This is such a great way to see the landscape. I'm noticing, Bruce, I guess, and everybody else, the rocks that are directly below us that make some of these flat tops are known as the Columbia River flood basalts, and this is actually the Owyhee subgroup. I could probably talk more about those a little bit later. But what I'm so amazed about right now is in the canyon, you can see how flat they are and how kind of slightly angled they are to the north. But in this case, you get to see how each separate block has a slightly different orientation, which suggests to me that there's a lot more faults, or non-active faults, but were faults in this area that were changing the orientation of each of these blocks through time, right? In the distance, you can see one orientation as compared to the foreground.
That goes on us as friends of the Owyhee. One of the things that we're really trying to promote is more scientific research, because things like that are kind of very misunderstood of this region, and there's many other factors that are misunderstood. There's so much potential for more scientific research on this landscape to understand it better. So off to the left is the dam right below us, more or less. That dam was actually the predecessor to the Hoover. It was a test model for the Hoover Dam.
Right behind us here?
Yeah. And right now it's at capacity. Yeah, I think we flew right over the top of it.
You can see the glory hole.
Yeah, the glory hole's flowing right now, and it hasn't flowed in many years.
Where'd my camera go?
Oh. Yeah, you just seen a big old mist come out of the glory hole. It's burping back.
Ah.
Could have missed that, sorry.
All right.
I didn't see it. Maybe if I turn hard to the left, we might see it.
Tim, is that the eastern terminus down there of the Oregon Desert Trail?
Yeah, the eastern terminus of the Oregon Desert Trail that starts in Bend and ends here at Lake Owyhee.
Really, we're not going to...
750 miles of desert hiking. It's an all-digital trail. There's no signage on the landscape.
35 Alpha, turning right base for 30.
That was a good shot. We missed.
Yeah, Bruce, we could just kind of go like right up the Sucker Creek drainage from here, I guess. Since we turned to this point.
I was hoping to get a picture of that dam, but it happened. I didn't see it.
Well, depending on how time and everything else, we could follow the Sucker Creek drainage up and then I guess come back down, but...
Well, do you want to go up the canyon? I mean...
Yeah, we can follow the canyon up.
Which is the better one, yeah?
Yeah, let's follow the canyon up.
I think the canyon's better. Yeah. I just thought I'd get a picture of that dam, but I didn't.
Sammy, can you elaborate maybe on why they chose that site as building the dam, geologically speaking?
Yeah, exactly. I was just thinking about that. There's so many impressive things about that dam, you know, its age and being the predecessor of the Hoover and whatnot. But it also is, as Tim's saying, it's very geologically controlled. If you look back at the reservoir, the very lower part of the reservoir, you can see the rocks are kind of bulbous. They're almost vertically oriented, the cliffs. But then by the time you get about halfway up, in some cases, or even less than that, the rocks are very flat. They're horizontally oriented and they're almost in layers. So those are two different formations. The lower things are rhyolites, which are kind of a toothpaste-like volcanism. but the flat things are basalts, which is much more like Hawaiian flowy type of volcanism. And right there at the dam, there's a big bulbous edge of a lava flow of rhyolite that the river was flowing against. And that's the narrowest portion of the canyon. I mean, you can see as we just flew over a portion of it, it's the narrowest portion of the canyon until you get much further, much deeper into the canyon. So that was actually the secondary proposed location for the dam. There was a spot a little bit further up back here to build it, but they ultimately chose that location because of that rhyolite bulb, or that rhyolite flow that's there. When they started excavating the area, they found that there was a fault. Lo and behold, as we just drove over the faulted landscape, there's lots of faults. So they ended up having to build or dig the dam foundation down about 30 or 40 more feet than they had originally planned for to excavate out the fault gouge to make that dam a little bit more stable. It's a non-active fault, by the way. I should be clarified to say that it's non-active, so they don't expect it to ever have any movement.
Off to the left up here is the Honeycombs Wilderness Study Area and AC. It's a great recreational opportunity. It's an area that you can find great solitude out here. There's no roads in this area. It's volcanically just so impressive here. It's very similar to Leslie Gulch, but harder to access. Great backpacking opportunity in here. I think most of us have, well, me and Randy and Becky, I know, have hiked in here at different times. It's a wonder of the Owyhee, and I mean, it's only an hour and a half from the valley. And I mean, you could start at the very top edge where the road boundaries it and hike all the way down to the lake.
I think he's kind of flying like directly over it.
Yeah, we're going right over it right now.
I'm going to put it on the right side. Everybody okay with a good turn?
Yep. This is part of it, and then off to the right is another great view of it. Yeah. If you flatten out here, we can see out the right side even better here. Yeah. Woo! This area is so unexplored in this area. So many opportunities to get out and find solitude and not see a person for days. We just flew over, I believe, Painted Canyon and Carlton Canyon. We're coming over. It's a great 10-mile loop following the drainages.
Such an exceptional landscape for a lot of its geologic features as well. So the yellow color comes from iron staining of this volcanic tuff. It was very iron rich. But then the type of weathering that's really particular here, it's called Phony Weathering. It's not a honeycomb weathering particularly, but Phony, where the outer portion of the rock face becomes very stable as it reacts with the atmosphere and water. But then once you carve a little hole into that hardened outer shell, the inside is really soft. So you end up with these holes in the rock that have sort of narrow openings, but big, open, cavernous, soft, eroded portions in the back. And then furthermore, you have these giant spires and these that stick up. So the juxtaposition of these amazing spires with the cavernous weathering is just, it's exemplary. It's not something really that you see in a whole lot of volcanic tuff landscapes.
Off to the right, it's really hard to see, but there's some wild horses down there. Right along that main trail you can see.
Gosh.
Oh, I don't see them.
All herd down there, about 10 or so.
In other direction here.
What?
Like where?
They're back here, it's alright. Pretty hard to see, I mean. And off to the left up here is Leslie Gulch, which is another area that easy for day hikes to get out for, you know, another hour to 2 hour drive from the valley, but so many more recreational opportunities. The Oregon Desert Trail that we mentioned, the eastern terminus at Lake Owyhee, it's easy to come down, park at Leslie Gulch, do a backpack trip through a weekend back to the lake. Sammy, you want to talk a little bit about the Caldera and how this kind of all formed a little bit? And,
Yeah, we're just about in the middle and just about on the far western edge of what's known as the Rooster Comb Caldera. And I think this feature right over here to the right is Rooster Comb, isn't it? Isn't it, Tim?
Yeah, that is called Rooster Comb, that ridge right there.
So the caldera is named after this feature, the Rooster Comb. That's just a topographic feature. But a caldera is a depression in the landscape. It's a volcanic depression. So if you have below the surface of the Earth, you have a large magma batch, and that entire magma extrudes to the surface of the Earth, it leaves a void below the surface. Well, that void then fills in with the top of the landscape, and it just caves in and forms a caldera or depression. Kind of like Crater Lake. It's a similar story of the caldera at Crater Lake. Anyhow, this gigantic caldera that extends a little bit beyond the Rooster Comb to the west of us, and then almost to Sucker Creek to the east of us, and we're Mahogany Mountain up here, the vegetated mountain, is at the south end. It's a huge, huge caldera, and when it erupted out the tuff of Leslie Gulch. That's all the yellow ash tuff that you see, as well as some of the green ash tuff that's out there as well. That eruption was so huge, as caldera eruptions often are. It was about 600 cubic kilometers of material. Now, for a reference frame of course, Mount St. Helens is vividly in our history. That was about 1 cubic kilometer. So this volcanism in one event of the caldera was about 600 times the size of Mount St. Helens. And that's from a recent reference, and I think the paper was 2018 or 2017 out of Stanford. Benson had mapped this area and calculated that volume. So this is why we call them super volcanoes. They're not just volcanoes like Mount St. Helens. This is a super volcano because it releases hundreds of cubic kilometers of material. Now, of course, this is really old. This formation is something like 14.2 million years old, so this happened a long time ago, and it's been eroding ever since.
We could just circle navigate maybe around the Mahogany Mountain. That way we could briefly talk about Jordan Craters in the distance out here. Okay. Maybe follow that Sucker Creek drainage back. And
this one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll make a turn.
Yep.
Come back here.
Yep. Off to the right out there is a completely different landscape geologically, and as you see out the right side, you got Jordan Craters, which is a lava field, which is just like Craters of the Moon National Monument, but just smaller. Very similar time frame for flows. A lot of recreational opportunities on the south end at Cow Lakes, but a lot of exploration can be done around it as well.
Yeah, a very different geologic story of the explosiveness that I just talked about as we're flying over Leslie Gulch. To the south of here, you have a lot more rhyolite flows that tend to be a lot more flat, and then capped by some basalt flows that also tend to be flat. So the nature of the Owyhee kind of changes for a little while until you get back into some of these caldera style of volcanoes, which there are more that lead all the way to McDermott at the Nevada-Oregon border.
On the geologic stuff is a lot of people don't realize that this is Yellowstone origin story right here. The start of Yellowstone was in this region.
That's what's so amazing.
Yeah, that is one of the most amazing things to me, you know, how the story ties in so integrally to one of our most well-known national landscapes, a national icon, right? The national park, Yellowstone. And, you know, what we're flying over is just an ancestral portion, a 16 million year old portion of that Yellowstone type of volcanism. And what's always funny to me as a geologist is being at Yellowstone National Park, or, you know, somewhere reading the literature and seeing this discussion of the Yellowstone hotspot, the Yellowstone plume, and then they say, oh yeah, well it originated in the Owyhee region of North America, and then everybody just goes, well, where's that? You know, it's this portion of the story of Yellowstone that's not very well illuminated. And that's unfortunate for both people that are learning about geology in national parks, as well as just geologists like myself. You know, it feels like the geologic history of this area is crucial to understand the geologic history of Yellowstone or of the rest of the Snake River Plain and so many other features here in Western North America. And as a geology student out of University of Oregon, I never came to this landscape. It's remote, it's hard to get to, and it's also just not very well, there's not a lot of literature out there. You're not going to be able to pick up just some book on the geologic history of the Owyhee.
And that has to do for many different aspects beyond geology, just the natural and human sciences. There's not much of this area.
Why is that? Just because it's remote?
I think remoteness is caused part of that. It's just, you know, the logistics of getting out on the landscape and doing the research. And again, that's kind of where one of our goals is to help with that, besides, you know, the public land issues on this landscape as well, is to promote the scientific research.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of it, Bruce, is it's so remote that it's difficult to do science out here. You know, it's difficult to get crews of people who want to come out here and do some different surveys, and then to come away with anything that adds to our knowledge. So we're kind of a little bit behind, at least geology, we're a little bit behind on the times here. There's a lot more that we could know, but there's a lot that we don't, and it kind of leaves a gap in our geologic knowledge here in the West. So again, we're trying to promote you know, different styles of groups, like scientists, to come out here and do a little bit more work.
On the human history side, there's very little research that's been done that way. They know the ancestry of land of who was here, but very little study of how long and different things like that. And just about 100 to 150 miles to the west, they're finding some of the oldest artifacts in the nation right now. So 100 to 150 miles in that time frame really wasn't that far. So we could have had some of the oldest human inhabitants in the United States in this region, but there's no science to back that.
Yeah, primarily not as much exploration as there could be, right?
Yeah, there's only 2 or 3 archaeological studies of this region.
Hey Tim, the craggy area that looks like Leslie Gulch Tuff out here to the west, is that all the Honeycombs?
Yes, that is the Honeycombs out there. And to the almost right out our left side now is Three Fingers, which is an iconic viewpoint throughout most of the valley. And we're getting ready to fly over Sucker Creek, which is another, you know, hour drive from Boise, hour drive from Adrian. Recreational opportunity. It's an area that we've actually been focusing on pretty hard as an organization. We've got an adopt-a-park agreement. State Park's really focused on making it a natural area. It's already Sucker Creek State Natural Area. And so they're really going to start focusing on managing it as a natural area, but also they want people to come and see it and camp out and treat the land with respect. So it's an area that's close to everybody, but you can get out and find a natural landscape to enjoy. That will be right off of our left side here in a few minutes, or about 30 seconds. McIntyre Ridge, is right out the left right now. Off to the right is the Pole Creek Basin.
So much water.
So much water. Crazy. I think, you know, to fly over this landscape, we're able to access so much with our eyes so quickly, where, of course, hiking, it's a much more intimate, we would have to do this much more slowly, which is also equally as dangerous, right? I think that, you know, we have the utmost respect for this landscape out here because it's so harsh. It's so difficult to hike out here for multiple hours at a time and to be safe. And I think as we think about recreation in the future and getting people out here, or at least facilitating people to get out here, it's maps, it's trails, safety, right? I think those are definitely priorities as far as when we're discussing this. When we take personal groups out, we all need to know where we're at. We all need to know how to be safe, you know, and to stay safe. I think that's one thing as we consider moving forward in all of this is signage, right? Maps, accessibility.
Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, as we're talking about these different areas and hiking areas, and I'm thinking, how would I even out?
It happens all the time. Like folks come to the BLM, the state parks, and others, and they ask, "Hey, where can I go hiking?" And they don't even have the resources to really point them to a direction.
Well, it's a wonderful opportunity to get them into places they think will benefit the land, give them the most experience. I mean, this is a wide open.
Yeah.
This is something that really is.
I agree. There's so many opportunities for so many different things right now on this landscape. And as we talk about the future and populations ever growing, you know, but we also need to figure out how to draw a line in the sand and how to teach outdoor ethics.
Well, that's what I mean. I mean,
Yeah.
you rarely see a landscape this big unimpacted. Ranches, nothing. I mean, there's nothing out there.
Yeah.
Speak to this fire right here on the left.
So the
once
soda
again-
fire, I'm drawing a blank on exactly what year that happened. It was 5 years ago or so. No, it was a devastating fire to this landscape. It burned super hot and fast, which then took a lot of the sagebrush off and is allowing these invasive grasses and mainly cheatgrass and Medusa head rye come. But on that also, they're doing a lot of scientific study and research from this fire, trying to figure out ways to improve this landscape using human intervention. There's a lot of good case study coming out of this fire, even though it was such a devastating thing to the landscape.
Yeah, I was up here flying it, whatever it was, like I said, 5-6 years ago. And it was one of the first really, really hot fires that subsequently we've had a lot of them. But this was one of the ones that said, man, how did this get so hot so fast, so quick?
So
Yeah.
Tim, what is this road over here to the right of us?
To the right?
It goes back up the hills.
Oh, that one, I'm not sure the name of it, but you can get back around to Sucker Creek on that road. I know we,
Temperature 19er.
Jump Creek is over there right to the right.
3.05.
I'd have to look back on a map to find the name of that road, but I know that is a heavily used road. Lots of potential to get it back into Oregon and clear down to Sucker Creek as well.
Caldwell Industrial Airport.
Yeah, is that the road that comes across the bridge out of Sucker Creek State
It
Park?
might be the Antelope Springs Road. It might be.
Zulu.
Looks about right.
26.
That's awesome.
Zero.
So are those roads on Google Maps?
Yeah. A lot of...
Caldwell traffic, Skyline
There's a lot of...
301 Delta, clear of active runway taxi into midfield. Correct, it is.
Hey, thank you.
We good, Bruce?
Yes, we are. Thank you.
So there's a lot of roads on this landscape that are technically county roads, but the county, you know, that there's budget restraints and everything there that they can't get out and maintain, so the BLM does what they can to help maintain them. But just about every named road that you can find on Google Maps is a county road in the landscape. And that being one of them, Antelope Springs Road is a county road.
I find that most of those roads, if they're listed or shown there on Google Maps, that they're passable?
Passable, some yes, some no. I mean, it's, you just got to get to know the landscape on some of them to know what's doable. Most of them roads, I would say you need at least high clearance.
Right.
Besides the main road that goes through like Tucker Creek or the Leslie Gulch, that a minivan.
Yeah, again, another one of the difficulties with trying to talk to people about going out to these places is, some of those roads just aren't fit for such and such vehicle.
Right.
And then even some of them change conditions throughout the year, right? Where they're a little more wet or whatever it is. And I think there's a combination of both mapping and education about the existing roads that we can do for educating folks to get out there, as well as some additional maintenance on these things. There's some roads that should be more accessible so we can, have access to a little bit more of the landscape. So there's probably some sort of balance that needs to be struck there with additional maintenance on existing roads and then education about passable roads.
And with that, as the population grows, we're going to have to spread out more so we don't impact the land in certain areas, essentially overlove the land. So, them are conversations for sure in the future. And as the Owyhee front gets more and more recreation going, which there's a huge influx in the last 5 years, conversations are going to happen. And how to put that line in the sand and say, where we're overloving it, we need to work together to find a solution so we don't degrade the land.
Call traffic, Skyhawk 810 X-ray is clear back to the Juliet. Eastbound, Caldwell.
I think it's cool to get more places that were a little more approachable. Like, talk about 3 or 4 places, like Sucker, right? On the Idaho side of the Owyhee as well, where it's more comfortable getting out,
Yeah, like the Idaho side, at least in conversations with the BLM, the recreation guy, right? They have a much better handle on where to go, what to do, what to take when you're going, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, Idaho has done tremendous over on that side.
No. Working. We got tons of questions over at Raptor Fest last week on where can I go in the Owyhee, I heard of it, like where can I start, and you can point to Light Trail or Purge Canyon on the Idaho side. Got so many questions about that, and folks asking for OHV use, like, well, there's a great road by the dam, and that's sort of surprising how many walked up and asked questions.
Well, the short answer, I suppose, here in about 5 years is, there's a town of Adrian. If you go there, they got plenty of resources for how to get you out there, right?
That's right. Yep, that's
Really, that's what it takes is a centralized, funneled place. You look at any national monument, national park kind of thing, whatever it is, leave the national stuff out of it. There's
X-ray is departing runway 30 and remain in the pattern Caldwell.